What's up, everybody? OldSchoolNYCGamer here once again at Classic Gaming Expo 2014 here in Las Vegas, Nevada, and I have a very special guest here. And I was surprised I got him to do the interview, and it's the one and only Jay Smith. How are you, sir?
My pleasure. Good.
And for some of you who do not know who this gentleman is, as you see right here, for a lot of you who thought that the Game Boy was actually the first, portable gaming system, you're dead wrong, everybody. This would be the gentleman here, and for a little history, this was the first system that actually had interchangeable cartridges, on the go. And of course, when Ralph Baer did the Magnavox Odyssey, it was also the first console to, have interchangeable cartridges. But, I digress here with Mr. Smith. So, Mr. Smith, just to give some of the viewers out there, like, kind of a quick summary of your history within gaming, how would you start it off?
Well, we started off as toy inventors, and then presto changeo, onto the toy market came video games and electronics. Started out, maybe one of the first was a handheld LED games, football game by Mattel.
Yes.
And they came out. That was wonderful. And then shortly after that, we got involved in doing LCD games. Actually, as an aside, one of my businesses was making LCD chemicals that went into LCD displays. So I was very interested in LCDs. But at the time we did this, they were only able to have 3 rows of active dots. And so that was what they used to make the digits in making numbers and letters, little symbols. It's about the most you could do with that. And so the breakthrough was for us to get the LCD here to do 16 rows. And nobody could believe that we did that. 16 rows. How do you do that? Yeah,
so with the development of the system, how long from the drawings to the release, how long in that process did it take?
It was about, the easy answer is about a year, but there was sort of developments on each end. The very beginning, figuring out how could you do it, designing the system in the game, and then how do you manufacture it. So there's the 3 parts to that.
Okay, and so now, of course, we're going to flash forward a little bit to 1981, and of course, at that time, Atari was really big within television. And, even though Nintendo was kind of waiting in the weeds, not just yet, though, they're still doing their thing in Japan, you were in development of a very, I can't say really rare system, but a very scarce one but only like hardcore collectors now in this day and age, just go crazy over it, and that is a Vectrex. And, how did that really come along from, after doing the Microvision to the Vectrex?
We were really trying to do something new. That's always what we tried to do. And what do you do new in a game? Well, you design the game, make it run. But it's the display. In this case, for the Vectrex, was a CRT. It took us, since we were so involved with LCDs, it took us a while to get, you can do something with cathode ray tubes. And once we got there, everybody was doing raster scan, complicated, expensive. So we thought, how about vector scan? And vector scan is, emblematic of that is an oscilloscope, what the electronic technicians use for the oscilloscope.
Yeah, and if it wasn't for that, really, we wouldn't have technically the first video game ever.
That's right.
And so I mean, like, it fascinates me, the fact that, because of course, even 5 years ago, hearing about the system, seeing it, I'm like, oh my God, it's a smaller version of Asteroids. And even though when you had the built-in game Mindstorm, it kind of was a clone, but not really. It was more like it had the idea, but not the full-on total clone of it. Now, when it comes to vector graphics, I mean, like I said, that was very innovative at the time, especially for the release for it when it came out in '83. I mean, did you ever see it? I mean, if not for the crash in the States in '84, would you have seen the system go as far, say, a 10-year lifespan?
Well, I think so, but it would have had to evolve fairly quickly as we made it as a vector, black and white vector scan, but then we put a color sheet over the screen. The sheet was colored. The vectors came through. That gave it a color persona, but it wasn't real color. So we had to go color. We would have had to go where you can draw many more lines. So we're limited in the number of lines you can go. If you put too many lines, it started to flash.
Yeah,
and so
you get the flickering effect.
So you'll see so many games when they really get intense, they flicker. So we'd have had to done that, and maybe evolve into some way that there could be stationary items which didn't move as much. The real advantage of what we did then, to sort of switch the subject a little, why were vectors good, is that in a raster scan system, if you wanted to rotate or zoom, that was a big deal because you had to have an image in memory for every size and for every rotation. In vector scan, you just rotated it, zoomed it, and
yeah, because with most arcade developers, to get certain sprites to go, especially if you had a lot of enemies, like say Commando, for example, even though that was done way later when Capcom did it, you know, so many enemies on the screen, but you know the way they engineered that game was, you know, innovative. But of course, you know, trying to port it over to a home system is quite difficult, especially. But the way, you know, with a lot of the games that were developed for the system, I mean, I would say Hyperchase, if I got the name right. Hyperchase, very fun game, but so difficult on the controls. Even super sensitive. If I just went one centimeter, I would just crash right into the wall. But even some homebrew, or actually some people within the community actually even made a peripheral for it. And I tried it, and it was so super fluid. Like it was just like I was driving a car. You know, I mean, and then that's what today, like 30, 35 years later, that people are so passionate about this specific system that there's homebrews coming out for it, new games, clones of popular arcade games. And I mean, I guess in a way, for me, in my opinion, I'm just very intrigued by it, that 35 years later, that people who weren't even born yet just want to do so much work for it and put their time and effort to make something that looks so good. I mean, for some people it might seem so primitive, but yet again, being in second generation gaming myself, it still fascinates me that it has that staying power, you know? I mean, and in your opinion, I would say, what would you think even today, like now in 2014, that it still has, I can't say it's a second life, but it's never really died. It's just been there. I mean, what are your feelings on that?
well, it had so many unique things then that some of them even still carry over today. The analog joystick, the fact that you had then the easy ability to zoom and rotate with all those things, and the fact that it just looks and feels different is a real advantage.
Yeah, and of course there's always that mainstay, like how it sold itself was, you know, that you could take the arcade experience home with you, which even at the time, the closest thing I would say maybe was a ColecoVision, but of course, you know, not everybody could just take it and bring it to the house. You could just pick it up and go with it, you know, but of course you had to be careful because if you dropped it, that was you know, I don't think there were too many Vectrex repair centers in the United States for that. So, you know.
Well, that was the big difference. You can play with it in the living room, you can play with it in your bedroom. How many kids' bedrooms had TVs then?
A few, but of course, you know, there's always the fights of like, I want to play this, you know, or I want to watch TV, and they're like, oops, I'll take mine, and go home.
So it was a real advantage. It was just different in so many aspects. That's why we were excited about it, but we're really complimented that people have an interest in it today.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, even with this expo, so many people, it's carried on. Like, I mean, especially within the last, I mean, in my opinion, the last 15 years, like it's every year it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And of course, with other expos like PAX East, Portland Retro Gaming Expo, MacFest, in some extent, like there's always going to be that niche, but the niche keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger because there's a lot of interest within that specific thing, you know. But I mean, I would say to my audience, I mean, well, how do you feel even in 2014, like gaming today? I mean, what is your opinion on it today, whether it be retro or new generation gaming?
Well, I think I will always have an interest in video games. And I'm just dazzled at how many kids get so involved that they're so interested in the next game of a particular type. The one that goes on and on and on is football, John Madden football. Every fall there's a new one.
Yeah.
And it went from where all you had is a football moving on a screen to now where you have players that look like real players
Yeah,
in the game.
it's almost like you're watching an actual game.
It's practically a movie.
Yeah.
And I just think that's fascinating. And the good part of it is it teaches kids who are doing that, and gamers, intimate relationship with electronics. They don't probably think of it that way, but they have an intimate relationship that readies them for the times ahead when, as electronics control us more and more and more, it's a part of their lives, and we're a part of that.
Yeah, and even like my final question would be, going back to the Vectrex, when the cards came out, I believe it was 29 titles at the time that were released. And of course, I would think that, you had a very big development team to work on. And did you have like certain teams work on certain games, or you just had the whole team go into, just to that one specific game?
No, there were certain teams at the time. It was a programmer, one, and eventually two, but one programmer, team of graphics, and some audio and so forth that came from different team members. Now, in the video games that are out there, my God, it's like producing a movie.
Yeah.
And
I mean, from start to finish on the games being on a 4K, but I think with the exception of Spike, what was the time frame like for a specific Vectrex title from beginning to end? Because depending, it really did depend on the title, but on like an average, what would, from start to finish, like the development, how long would that all take?
6 months. It's depended so much on the game and what you were doing, but just to pull something out of the air, 6 months I would say was the time. But there were some done in much less than that.
Yeah, I mean, even though now, would you see yourself, just out of curiosity, would you see yourself possibly doing a game for the Vectrex now in 2014?
No, I don't think for me. I'd be glad to wave my hands and direct it. But the people who are really good at that are to me, kids in their 20s or so, something like that, where they're really enthusiastic. They're really looking beyond what's there to do. I mean, I get all excited thinking about it, but to actually direct the details of that, I'd leave it up to some new guys.
Okay, well, like I said, thank you very much, Mr. Smith. Thank you for taking the time out.
Thank you.
And everybody, like I said, this is the one and only Jay Smith. So if you want to know more information, I mean, you could look on the internet. This was the man who put this out right here. Remember, if you didn't have this, you wouldn't have a Game Boy. Just think about it like that. That's one way of putting it. But anyway, people, that's about it. Thank you everybody for watching, and all my new subscribers, thank you for tuning in. If you want to follow me, check me out on Facebook, Twitter, DailyMotion, and that's about it, everybody. Thank you so much for watching, and don't worry, I'm gonna have more content here for the Classic Gaming Expo 2014, and that's about it. Have a good one, everybody, and take care. Cheers.